The Simpsons and Family Guy, two adult animated shows airing on the same network about a dysfunctional family living in a kooky town with wacky characters. When it's described like that, you would think these two shows are incredibly similar, but as I'm sure most of you know, they really aren't all that alike. I mean, look at them. One of them is yellow, stupid. How do people really not know the difference at this point? Sitcoms airing around the same time tend to step on each other's toes, whether it be with jokes or plot lines or even characters in some instances. But for an informed viewer, that being someone that's at least seen an episode of each show is really all you need to tell the difference between them, it's easy to tell that these two shows are very, very different in their execution, as well as with their senses of humor, amongst countless other differences. But just because they're different in a lot of ways doesn't mean the show's respective writers didn't like to joke about all the ways they were similar. The Simpsons and Family Guy have been taking subtle and not so subtle jabs at each other for years, and most of the time, they're pretty damn funny. Most of the jokes are pretty harmless, like Peter turning yellow from jaundice.
Oh my God! Peter, you don't look so good.
What are you talking about? I feel great. Like I could go another 20 years or more.
Or Homer cloning himself and one of the clones winds up looking exactly like Peter Griffin. The jokes tend to boil down to The Simpsons joking about how Family Guy is ripping them off, and Family Guy joking about how old and played out The Simpsons is after decades on the air. It was a healthy little rivalry, and as a high schooler watching Family Guy a lot, I thought it was really fun. But this one time, things went a little bit too far. How far, you ask? So far that it has a thing that I can't say for YouTube or I'll get in trouble, is how far it went. It'll make sense shortly. Okay, so there's this episode of Family Guy from season 6 called Movin' Out Brian's Song, a reference to the Green Day song of the same name or whatever, whoever's sang it. I don't know, I'm not Googling that. Cher, was it Cher? Okay, it was Cher. Cher's song, Movin' Out. The episode was your standard Family Guy affair. It's really not all that important for this video. What is important is the gag that takes place during a scene in the Griffin family living room. Lois, Peter, and Brian are talking about how Brian the dog is shallow, and no, I don't really care either. During the scene, though, a little pop-up appears promoting The Simpsons, complete with a little version of Marge waving at the audience.
That's a little version of me, Alan.
What follows is one of the most confusing and uncomfortable jokes, I guess is what we'll call it for right now, I've ever seen in Family Guy, and Family Guy is known for its edgy humor.
She's devoted a lot of time and energy to this relationship with some expectation that it could grow into something much more significant, and if you're just stringing her along, well then I gotta say, I've lost a lot of respect for you, Brian.
See, that wasn't so bad, was it?
Oh, I gotta say, that was fantastic.
What do you say we go back to your place for round 2?
Sounds good to me.
Oh boy, there's a lot to unpack there, and it's going to be difficult to do in an ad-friendly way. So real quick, I'm going to edit my script to change one letter real quick and make this all A-OK for RC Cola or whoever sponsors YouTube videos. Okay, Control F, find and replace, change all P's to K's, there we go. Okay, now we're in a cruddy good Scott. Apologies for any problems, I may have gone too far with this. It's a rake joke. Yeah, that's allowed. I've checked, I'm pretty sure. And a pretty blunt and unfunny one at that. But Mr. Cow, you say from your seat in the movie theater playing this video in the year 2050, Family Guy has made tons of rake jokes. Why is this one any different? That's a fair question. It turns out Family Guy is no stranger to jokes of this nature. They've actually made a lot of jokes on this subject compared to other shows, unless of course we're talking about The Boys. You'd think The Boys takes place fully in the fall in a field filled with leaves with how much raking is going on in there. All right, we're teetering on the line here a little bit. Let's get back to the topic at hand. I don't want to get in trouble. Now look, we can argue about whether or not something as serious as this should even be joked about at all. But the fact that there is a question of should this be allowed means that someone is going to do it just for the shock value. Hell, I did it a few seconds ago, and Family Guy loves its shock humor. So a topic like this isn't completely off limits in their eyes. Regardless of how you feel about rake humor, this execution is downright bad. It's uncomfortable, off-putting, and the core of the joke seems to be, wouldn't it be funny if Glenn Quagmire from Family Guy had non-consensual sex with Marge and she liked it? Not sure how this one made it out of the writer's room, frankly, but would you believe it gets worse from here? Oh yeah, this is only the first part of this gag. There is a second part.
What do you say we go back to your place for round 2?
Sounds good to me.
Wow, 3 times in a row! You're amazing, Glenn!
Oh, I just take a lot of pride in what I do.
Hey, what's going on here? Ah! Get off my wife!
Oh my god! Oh my god!
You shot my homie! I'm calling the police!
Ay, caramba! Mom and Dad are dead! Oh no! Who will pay for my saxophone lessons?
Wow, isn't that edgy? Quagmire freaking kills the freaking Simpsons. Freaking sweet, dude. That's freaking epic, dude. The impressions in this bit aren't even that good. They decided to make the scene just a shot of the Simpsons house so they wouldn't have to animate anything, and the least they could have done is tried to get voice actors that kind of sounded like the characters. I mean, Homer sounds a little bit close, but everyone else, to me, is just completely off. It's hilariously lazy and bad. When your entire joke is basically hanging on the tiny thread of these are the Simpsons that Glenn Quagmire is killing and they don't sound like the Simpsons, the joke kind of falls apart because everything else is just shock. Oh god, isn't it shocking that Glenn Quagmire from Family Guy did this and then killed the Simpsons? Isn't that crazy? Well, it doesn't sound like the Simpsons. It feels like a lazy Newgrounds animation from 2005. Like, this is beyond terrible. I cannot believe that something this lazy made it onto network television. I guess, honestly, most network television is really, really lazy, but this is like a different level of lazy. It feels like it was made by an 8th grader. But I'm sure you're wondering, why on earth are we talking about this, right? Family Guy has plenty of jokes that are both in bad taste and unfunny. But the reason this one is different is because Seth MacFarlane has talked about this specific gag before. And why, you may ask? Well, because Fox thought the joke went too far and didn't want it to air, much to Seth's dismay.
Generally on these DVDs, I am very diplomatic about the network. I'm not going to be diplomatic because what happened here was fucking bullshit.
Oh my god. I totally forget about
This is a gag. I got a call from the network saying you can't do this. You cannot do this gag. And with the Simpsons, and I said, why not? They've made fun of Family Guy like 5 times, which they're entitled to do. I mean, they make fun of everyone, and so do we. So why can't we take a little shot at them? And they said, well, because we want to end the feud. And I said, well, what feud? What are you talking about? I mean, I had talked with Matt Groening, who has a wonderful sense of humor about this stuff. And, there's no feud. Plus it's...
We actually have had a couple of writers, Simpson writers, who have written for Family Guy, Richard Pell and Brian Scott.
Yeah, I mean, it's, they've taken many, many shots at us, again, all of which have been funny. And Fox said, well, this seems a little personal. And I said, well, how could it be any more personal than a picture of Peter Griffin on a wanted poster that says plagiarist? Which, again... we take some nasty shots, so whatever, but the playing field has to be even. And they said, no, it's got to stop here. And then it got ugly because I said, the problem here is that you don't want us, you never had any problem. It was very suspicious that this was coming up when we were the ones making the joke as opposed to The Simpsons. And the reason I still maintain is that, and I said this to them, you're afraid of James L. Brooks, who runs The Simpsons. You're afraid of James L. Brooks, and you're not afraid of us. And that's why we can't do it.
I have to go.
This has to fucking come out because I've been growing tumors about this for too long.
So Seth MacFarlane thought censoring this gag was unfair to Family Guy and thought Fox was playing favorites with The Simpsons. The joke he's talking about with Peter on a wanted poster for plagiarism is a pretty tame and funny little joke from The Simpsons. And Seth MacFarlane doesn't even mention the latter part of the gag where it's a picture of Stan Smith from American Dad also being listed as a plagiarist of a plagiarist, which is pretty funny. This Simpsons gag is all in good fun, and it's pretty tame in my opinion, because as I established at the start of this video, these two shows are very different. Yeah, they have similarities, and that's what The Simpsons is joking about. People always joke that Peter Griffin is just a bigger, dumber Homer Simpson. But here's the crazy part of all of this. It seems like This gag with Quagmire was a direct response to The Simpsons calling Peter Griffin a plagiarismo. The episode of The Simpsons where this joke is from, The Italian Bob, released on December 11th of 2005. And this episode of Family Guy, Movin' Out Brian's Song, came out on September 30th of 2007. So Seth MacFarlane was seemingly responding to a joke about plagiarism from The Simpsons with a joke about Quagmire raking Marge and killing The Simpsons. This is like a petty squabble between animators on Newgrounds, except it's happening on network television. Talk about a bizarre situation. This was about as heated as the Simpsons and Family Guy feud got, and it seemed to be entirely because of Seth MacFarlane, ironically, not being able to take a joke. With the full context of this situation, it really does seem like the plagiarism joke got under Seth MacFarlane's skin, and he chose the nuclear option in response. So did this lead to an all-out war between the two shows? Well, no, actually. In fact, after this, the jokes between the two shows got a lot more tame, and I would say a lot more funny. It's important to remember that Seth MacFarlane and Family Guy had been put through the ringer over at Fox, being canceled multiple times and constantly living in the shadow of The Simpsons. Seth MacFarlane's response to this innocent gag may have been way over the top, but I'm sure in his eyes he was just trying to show audiences that if you take a jab at Family Guy, they'll hit back far, far harder, even if it's not entirely funny, which is actually pretty on brand for the show. Since this incident, there have been a few more jokes between the two shows. Of course, there was the crossover episode, and Family Guy has come around with some self-deprecating humor.
We act like we didn't take a lot from The Simpsons. We took a lot from The Simpsons.
And just like that, this story kind of comes to an end. It's a bit anticlimactic, and sure, Family Guy took it from 0 to 100, and then we just kind of slowly rolled to a stop, but these are grown adults we're talking about that act like children, not actual children. They may have their petty squabbles, they may go back and forth with their jokes, but they're all adults at the end of the day, and they chose to bury the hatchet and stick to the more tame style of humor that we see between the two shows today. It seems that both shows have respect for one another, despite the fact that they'll still take jabs at each other from time to time. So what if Peter Griffin is just a more blown up version of Homer Simpson? Both shows stand on their own and are usually pretty fucking boring and awful these days. I think Simpsons writer and producer Mike Reyes put it best in his book Springfield Confidential when he said, quote, "When Family Guy debuted 10 years into the Simpsons run, our younger writers were incensed. It's just vulgar, it moves too fast, it's nothing but pop culture references. I had to laugh because these were all the things people said about The Simpsons when it began. Maybe that's why I have a soft spot for Family Guy. I think of it as The Simpsons after a few beers." This might be the best description of Family Guy I've ever heard. And of course, it had to come from a writer from The Simpsons. I mean, Jesus Christ, they can't even describe their show better than Simpsons writers. Although, I guess technically Mike Reyes also wrote a few episodes of Alf, so I guess Alf is really the victor in this whole situation. Long live our king!